All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Fatma Tamam, the Associate Program Manager, and welcoming you yet to another episode of Preparing for the Apocalypse webinars in collaboration with Brink and Be Entrepreneur. Today's topic is going to be logistics and Tech 4.0. Well, to introduce you to Brink first, Brink is a venture accelerator where we believe that most of prominent challenges around the world can be solved by entrepreneurs and startups, where we call them game changers. Be Entrepreneur is a media hub aiming to harness digital technology in order to shine a spotlight on the startup ecosystem and entrepreneurs. I welcome today our game changers in the logistics and tech 4.0 field. We also have our honored guests from representative from customs and a field industry agility, just to weigh in on their ideas for logistics and how we move things, the way we move, and its role in the world, how it shapes the world that we live in. So I'd like first to please the speakers go ahead and introduce yourselves, then we can go into the discussion. Our game changers, please go ahead.
Who would like to start? Go ahead.
Elaine?
Yeah, sure. I'm Elaine. I'm the CEO of Symphony. I'm here in Shenzhen at the moment. We're currently working out of the hardware accelerator HACS. We're building out our hardware here, and we're also part of the Brink program. We joined Brink last year in 2020, and we're excited to tell you a little bit more later about what we're doing.
Great. Thanks, Elaine. How about Max?
Yep, my name is Max Ward. I'm originally from the US, but I spent most of my career in Asia, based out of Hong Kong, working with multinationals, including agility. Agility really brought me to Pakistan and the Middle East maybe about 7 years back. I created a digital logistics company called OpenPort before. Then I got into AI and big data, and then created Libertrade, and we joined the Brink Hong Kong program and the logistics cohort in November.
Great. Well, Ed?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So my name is Wael Ben Ramdan. I'm the co-founder and chief sales officer at Sticker. We're a French-based startup looking at intratech issues, and our ambition is to basically tap into the power of IoT in order to deliver on operational excellence, risk mitigation, and predictive analytics, and also into really enabling parametric insurance to kick in versus the traditional insurance. We are a hybrid company, meaning that we have developed our own proprietary IoT smart device that is self-powered, connected with multiple communication protocols and sensors. And then we have a SaaS platform, which allows you to basically digitalize all operations and AI ML capability in order to get to predictive. So the entire value chain, we try to exploit as much as possible the entire value chain of our solution, and we see that parametric insurance is really where we want to go as future of money is involved.
Sounds good. Thank you, game changers. Bahrain Customs representative, Sheikh Abdulaziz.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Abdulaziz Al Khalifa, Customs Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain, and it's an honor for me to be here to join you guys. I'm currently running the project management office at the Customs. We recently launched our strategy for the next 2 years. It was a hectic run till the launch of it, but it's going to be, as Fatma was saying, a game changer, literally. So I'm looking forward for that.
Looking forward to that too. Thank you, Sheikh Abdulaziz. We have Agility's representative, I believe, Mr. Fahad. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Fahad Al-Shatti, and I work for Agility Venture Capital, or the corporate venture of Agility, and we're based out of Kuwait. And we've been enjoying the ride here in the region with all of this transformation happening and going ahead to the future.
Great. It's a pleasure having you both. Thank you so much for joining us. And we can start the discussion. We'll start by asking the game changers a few questions to get to know more about the field and what they're doing in providing their innovative solutions. We can start with Elaine, Symphony. Tell us more about Symphony. How have you imagined the company to change the way people move things?
Yeah, so I think the way we look at things is we see it as a huge disrupting change. I mean, to sort of tell you a bit what we're doing is we're working in predictive maintenance. So predictive maintenance is not a new technology at all. It's been around since the sort of 1970s, typically used in things like nuclear reactors, used in sort of petrochemical power, things like this, right? So it's been around for a while and it works, right? You can, using a lot of complex math, taking years to learn things like Mobius Institute of Technology, you can figure out the health of your machines. And there's some other startups that have come up and some sort of longer around companies that have basically tried to create, you know, a cut down version of what GE are doing. What we're doing is totally reimagining the way things are doing. We're not trying to take that same complex technology that's used in a reactor and make it a bit simpler. We're actually trying to create a platform for the other 99% of facilities that are not mission critical. We're trying to create an easy, simple, plug and play solution that tells you the health of those machines. And we're not going after, you know, mission critical things. We're going after facilities like manufacturing, looking at things like air conditioning units, things like this, where the consequences of failure are inconvenient, right? You know, production lines stop. There's costs associated with this. Air conditioning units fail, for example, in like a metro system, you have to close down a platform. You know, it's inconvenient, but it's not terrible. And we're creating a system that tells you when those machines are going to fail before they do, in an easy, simple to read kind of way that anybody could kind of work on. And I think that's a pretty big game changer.
Well, as you mentioned, since the predictive maintenance already existed long time ago. So what makes you groundbreaking? What makes Symphony special or unique? What's your value proposition in that?
So yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is where I think AI really comes into things. So everyone talks about AI as a kind of buzzword, but this truly is, I believe, and what made me really want to get involved in this is this really is an application where AI excels. Our CTO, his PhD is actually in machine learning, and I think this is for sure where AI excels. So it's something that's been kind of understood. There's tons of documentation on how to understand these machines. You can do a bunch of math. There's years of, you know, kind of education that you can do. And what we've tried to do is take all those books, take all that kind of reading, take all that kind of stuff, adding in big data, and then adding in AI, and then putting that together. So just like kind of some of these other fields where you're seeing like medicine, where, you know, instead of looking at one X-ray, or you know, maybe a doctor over his life has seen several thousand X-rays, AI can see millions, right? The same kind of comes for our machines, right? So instead of checking a machine kind of once a week and having these kind of readings, maybe you have several, you know, thousands or millions of readings. We can read the machine every 10 seconds on every machine, you know, in your facility, and then using big data against every other machine in the world. This is, you know, an infinite amount of almost data that we can analyze from. So it's where AI has to come in, because otherwise your AWS bill will be insanely high.
Right. Since Industry 4.0 is kind of your key area focus, it could have multiple applications. Have you tried multiple applications, or who are your clients at the moment?
Yeah. So it does have multiple applications. We're working on some kind of beachheads at the moment, working on some kind of stamping facilities. What we're doing in these kind of things is it's a little bit complicated when people say, where do you go? when, like, which kind of vertical do you go into, when essentially our system can work on any kind of machine, any kind of moving parts we can analyze, right? So if that's a cookie factory, or that's a bottling plant, or that's making cars for stamping, right? It's essentially the same. So something we've worked a lot on is stamping. We're looking at working in with some more companies expanding in this area. But essentially, wherever you have moving parts, we can analyze those moving parts and analyze those degradation. What we have found that's been quite interesting is the utilization. So in one of our facilities where we're using it, they have different production lines, right? And when they put them up on the TV and they can see production line A, for example, is doing, sort of 90% efficiency, and production line B is doing, 110% efficiency, it intrinsically motivates the workers to actually create more output. So we're seeing a lot of kind of really positive things coming from this. In output, we're seeing less kind of wastage. Before, in our case study, it's a high-end French cosmetics company. I'm sure everyone knows this company when they've seen it. They're basically creating the exterior packaging, and their machines were over lubricating each other to obviously not break the machine. But this required human assembly and human kind of wiping off all the excess lube, which was sort of 4 to 6 workers trying to clean off this excess. And by using our system, they know exactly when to lubricate their machines, and they're able to repurpose those workers into actually creating more output and more manufacturing in that same facility. So really quite good for everyone.
Well, it sounds like a bit more complex, maybe, from what we can hear. Like it requires on-job training or years of training and exams, and then you just put in the AI algorithms. So let's talk more about what your technology is like in the AI and the algorithms that you're using.
Yeah, so we have a great slide in our pitch deck where it says step 1, you attach our sensor magnetically to your machine. And then step 2, you turn on the iPad app or your Mac app. And then step 3, there is no step 3. So we're really just trying to plug this in, look at your iPad, you can see the data. You can see it on the factory floor. You can see it, in head office. You can see it wherever. And all that complex AI, big data, all that stuff I told you about, we do all of that ourselves. So you don't actually have to look at any of that. Just like the internet, you don't actually have to understand how it works to be able to use it. And we believe, just like AOL, I don't know quite how old everyone is in this group, but before AOL, there was the internet, and you could type lines of code into things and you could get online. And AOL just shipped disks out to people. You stuck the floppy disk into your computer, and there was a little GUI, you pressed it and you got online. And that was it. It was just that easy. And that's kind of exactly what we're trying to do, is do all the complicated backend stuff so you don't have to.
So it's as easy as 1, 2. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. There is no step 3.
All right. So how do you see the way that we're moving is different and changing because of what had happened during the COVID situation, of course?
So I've basically been in China, and I'm unable to leave China because of the COVID restrictions. So for us as a company, the one thing it's caused us is we can't really go global very easily. So it's not allowed us to go and kind of meet with customers, meet with investors, meet with people, and we can only do things virtually, which has basically made us focus on the China market, which we wouldn't have originally kind of done. We would have kind of globally addressed customers that were sort of really interesting to us, and being able to pop on a flight and talk to people convince them to take some kind of products, show them kind of what it can do. That's just not available to us anymore. And I think that's been probably one of the sort of saddest things that I've seen from the COVID thing here in China, from a business perspective, obviously. But yeah, I think that's from the business perspective of COVID, that's been the hardest for us, is not being able to leave China. Inside China, everything's completely open up. You know, there's trade shows, expos, you know, large gatherings. So we're able to kind of get the word out there, but only here in China. And yeah.
In your opinion, what can people expect from the Industry 4.0 future, or how do you see these changes happening in the next 5 years?
So I see Industry 4.0 has lots of different parts to it, right? And we're only a small component of what Industry 4.0 can do. I mean, the ultimate goal of Industry 4.0 is essentially sort of fully autonomous factories, or getting closer to fully autonomous factories. And I think just like we're seeing with driverless cars, right? With Tesla and things like this, we're only scratching the surface of what's going to be there, right? And we're just a small component of that, right? We're looking at utilization, we're looking at health, and we're looking at sort of trend analysis, things like this. So we're a critical part of that Industry 4.0, but there's so much that Industry 4.0 can do. And we hope that actually if we end up with the bandwidth, we can grow into other areas as well, or collaborate with other people in the Industry 4.0. But I see the future as, you know, essentially factories are going to be really autonomous, and all of this sensing and data is going to be critical to creating those autonomous factories. But to start with, just like with the car industry, we're going to have a hybrid mode where we have some horses on the road and we have some cars on the road.
Couldn't agree more, Elaine. Thank you so much for these valuable details and information. Well, we'll move on to Max, the founder of Libera Trade Company. Max, Libera Trade is described as the first move in the big data for supply chain and frontier markets. Can you tell us what that means?
Right. I think when you look at it from an Industry 4.0 lens, it's when your consumer goods really have to move from manufacturing, you know, by logistics providers, companies like Agility that I worked for before, and then the brands control that. So you've got manufacturing, logistics, brands, then you've got the distributors, and then you've got the point of sale, which is omni-channel, but it's still usually a physical storefront. And all of that is what needs to be automated. And it's very siloed today in most of the world, but particularly in emerging markets. We look at 1 billion consumers that are not in China and not in India, but part of the emerging Asia growth story. And the large multinational and local brands that are reaching those 1 billion consumers. So we help them to predict what products will convert to cash, and then to continuously optimize those inventories to really make sure that what really is needed at the point of sale is always there and is prioritized, and that what isn't needed isn't pushed out. And this push out mechanism is just costing everybody tons of money, you know, billions or trillions, really, in all countries around the world, but it's particularly high inefficiency in countries like Pakistan. There's more stock outs, there's more unwanted inventory, things don't get financed. And it's really interesting how we've been able to come in relatively quickly, because due to COVID restrictions, I was kind of stuck in Hong Kong for a while, but it's just been taking off at a very rapid pace in this country. And the return on investment, I actually think, may be higher in countries like Pakistan on supply chain, you know, demand-based artificial intelligence. And the reason that the return on investment, I think, is higher is because the problems are bigger and the cost to solve those problems is lower. We SaaS our solution using Pakistani local data scientists to mine and analyze the data on a recurring cost basis, which is pretty low. But we look at really solving big gaps in the supply chain very quickly. And the whole landscape is changing amazingly quickly in terms of data availability.
Now that you've mentioned the COVID situation, how are the way that things were moving has been different? What changed, and because of what happened around the world, what impact did you see?
Well, I had the company started off, before Brink cohort started. I was down in Indonesia just when COVID, happened. Actually, we had a lot of things lined up, and I'm not an Indonesian citizen, so I have a company there. And I had been traveling for 15 years, more or less, with most of that time with an APEC card, and I just get over. I can go anywhere I want, and so very suddenly I wasn't able to go anywhere at all, and that really changed what we could do as a young company. So we started focusing on some opportunities in Hong Kong, but my passion is for these bigger markets. So I had Indonesia set up again, the trips and activity in November and December. Then the country closed off, and then I had good contacts in Pakistan, and decided we just pivoted the company really to Pakistan, and here and in UAE, we're able to travel pretty freely, and that's been encouraging. But I guess similar to what Alan said, you sort of have to orient yourself, realistically. If you have extremely mature products, which is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is relative new technology, things that need to be piloted, deployed. You need to get in front of those customers. You need to talk to them about their data. That could possibly happen over Zoom, but realistically, a lot of this interaction needs to happen on a face-to-face and a local basis. So it ends up changing how you can do things. But what we can do is in this country, we can go up and down the supply chain. So we can go from manufacturer, logistics, brand, distributor, retailer, and do that for multiple similar supply chains. And that's what has really been exciting and positive for me.
I guess since you mentioned that you've worked for Agility, Mr. Fahad, what would be your comment on that? How do you think the way we're moving things became different and changing of what happened during COVID? Would you agree with Max?
No, I totally agree with Max. He's an expert, much more than me, I think so. That kind of sector. Again, COVID-19 changed everything, but I'll go prior to COVID-19. So everybody's speaking about logistics transformation 4.0 for like the last decade, and things are changing. But the people which miss the biggest point that when you're speaking about logistics, you're moving something from point A to point B. So you're still moving something physically from point A to point B. The enhancements or the upgrades or better performance is usually maybe in the documentation or in processing some certain data, or as they said, optimization of the supply chain or the inventory control. These are the things you're going to be looking at. But when you get thing on a ship from point A, moving it all the way from China to Kuwait, it's going to always be in 19 days. It's going to be always in a loading port, through a truck, through things. So again, I always try to be more realistic on these kind of optimizations. So we can optimize maybe on the documentations, another thing. And we saw that in the travel agency industry 15, 20 years ago. We still everybody uses Expedia booking, but at the end, you want to go to a room, you want to have the key, you want to have that clean room to use. So the industry is going to change and it's going to revolve. And there's things will revolve in a different way. You're going to have better ships, you're going to have better things, but the 4.0 has an effect, but we need to understand what kind of effect we're speaking about on the 4.0. So that's, let's say, a simple comment on what I heard prior to this. So again, they are on the right directions. Controlling inventory is much more important than controlling the transportation. And the same thing with the maintenance part. Preventing maintenance is much more important than, For me, I'm more than the logistics. We've been using currently drones to do some maintenance on our warehouses. So we're trying to explore other things. But again, the main point, people always think that you're going to have something move faster. I don't think this is going to happen the next decade.
Decade. Wow. Well, thank you. But it seems that you're more willing in at Agility to adapt into what's happening and what's the new technologies that are emerging. Would you say the same thing, Sheikh Abdelaziz, at Bahrain Customs?
Yeah, I mean, at customs, we see things, like physical things. And like Fahad said, the ship will take X amount of days. You need to go through all of these loopholes or whatever you want to call them. And like Max and Alan said, they can add to it, they can fix it up, they can improve things, which is amazing. But I don't want to agree with Fahad totally that it will take another decade. Hopefully, we'll be faster than that. But like, let's say during COVID, when what happened here in Bahrain, we have one causeway that connects us to Saudi Arabia, and that was shut for passengers. And then all of a sudden, we saw a rise in online shopping. So like a lot of the goods were going through the air cargo, and there was a boom in that industry. So we, like we had to shift the guys from this side to that side. And probably Fatma, you might be aware of this. Like we never closed. We are on the front line from day one. Like everyone at customs, hats off to them, or qatra off to them, and they've done an amazing job. All of our colleagues. We shifted. We made two teams, 50%, 50%, so they won't be mixed up. And we gave them all the medical equipment necessary. So even though the world stopped, but we didn't stop. And like Fahad said, like the items are physically coming still in, so you need to physically be there and to inspect them to make sure.
Hats off to all of the teams involved, and thank you for pointing that out. Yes, it never stopped. Actually, it boomed. So yes, absolutely right. I guess we'll go back to Max about your AI-based solution. What is AI-based demand forecasting, if you don't mind explaining, and how is this revolutionizing the supply chain business?
Well, I think the concept of demand planning isn't really new. That's if you were buying and selling products or you're moving them and deciding what to produce, you've always had a demand planning function. In reality, most companies in emerging markets, even very multinationals, are sometimes working off relatively simple schemes like a rolling 12-month or 6-month rolling average, and joint meetings with their distributors to decide really what gets bought and produced on at most a quarterly basis. And then sometimes using fairly expensive SAP or Oracle or ERP-based tools to mine their own data and come up with some sort of report that gives them recommendations after some effort. That is based on looking at your own data, right? But consumer goods companies don't sell their own product. Like you don't go to really Nestle.com or Unilever.com to do all of your shopping. That comes through distributors and retailers, which is really about 1 million points of sale in Pakistan, over 2 million in Indonesia for Unilever, and probably more like 12 to 15 million points of sale in India. Now, when I used to come to these countries before, and you talk to Nestle and they would say, we will never know what our customers are really buying, which is an interesting problem because 90% of your Pakistani consumers are going into paper-based small shops to buy those products. We're speaking to 4 companies that are digitizing the point of sale, the Kiryana point-of-sale environment in Pakistan. One of them has 150,000 merchants. And we're getting that data already. So when you were demand planning on a 6-month basis before, based upon what you had in SAP and kind of taking a guess, now you're really able to look at other data sources and who is buying those products. And when you start looking at digital interactions and omni-channel, but even into the store, we are working on intelligent recommendations to the Kirana shopkeeper. Now, as you start recommending products to the shopkeepers and from distributors to retail, you need to make sure that those inventories are held and are prioritized so that you don't have stockouts. So this then creates a continuous cycle of promoting, improving sales, analyzing market intelligence, and then using as big a data set as possible about who's buying or will buy these products to have 10 to 100 times more accurate demand forecasting with integrated machine learning driven end-to-end inventory optimization. This raises profits and overall efficiency. It's also a much more sustainable and less wasteful supply chain. And I think again, if we just focus on these billion consumers in non-China, non-India, a little bit forgotten in some way, but as they're just consuming more and more, how much plastic, how much waste are we going to allow? We're not going to kill consumption, but we got to make that consumption more efficient. And so solving this problem really means you need to solve it with a very large set of data, and you need to continuously update it. So it's a perfect example of how the latest data science and machine learning technologies can really be applied to go from 50% forecast accuracy to 90% and higher, saving really millions of dollars and improving profits for everyone.
Would you say the AI base that you've just explained, demand forecasting, would be able to make each link of the channels that you've mentioned more efficient, or do we need to even add more?
Well, I think it's kind of simple that you focus on the brands first. So whether it's a large client just signed with us, which is Tapal has the largest tea market share in the country. But the project we have with them, it's our demand forecasting product, but it's also immediately translating that into warehouse inventory optimization. It's not looking at their sales in isolation. It's also looking at upstream inventory management. So you're moving one node up the supply chain. And then there's other projects where we're going one node down the supply chain. So we're looking at a brand zone data and saying, okay, let's add some distributor data and improve how you interact and how you make decisions about what distributors will be buying and what will be promoted. And then you want to add one more node after that, which is then this actual point of sale data revolution where things are coming really very richly from the actual retail environment. So you kind of start with the brand and you want to help them to understand their own data and go forecasting on what they have. And you want to make it more useful, one node in the other direction. And then ultimately, then you're really talking about 5 key nodes because you're adding in manufacturing on the far upstream side and point of sale at the far downstream right-hand side. And then you want to optimize all of that within the Liberatrade data lake. We're the first company that's really approaching it in that perspective where we ask for research rights on the data so that we can share back and forth and build this data asset that powers the algorithms for all of the key stakeholders, those 5 key stakeholders in the consumer goods supply chain.
Well, sounds great. Thank you so much, Max. Before we move on to the other game changer, well, I would like to hear from Agility on your thoughts on what Max just explained. And if you could tell us more about Shipafreet, I think, that if I'm pronouncing it right, and the digital logistics, I believe that Agility is incorporating currently. If you could tell us more about that.
So again, to go back to the point I just ended with my first comment, that things are not going to be moving faster, but we're going the same direction as Max is doing. We're moving from being B2B, more B2C, trying to get more information, more data. So 4 years ago, as Agility, we decided to build more digital platforms which interacts more frequently with the end consumers in a more transparent way. So we called it Shippa, which is almost like the Expedia of booking or Expedia. So if you go to Shippa Freight, if you're a small consumer or you have one container you want to move or one pallet you want to move, you just go to the platform and you book it. And on the same time, same kind of concept, we start building other digital platforms. Shippa Mall, which is like a drop-in shipping concept of that, or the Shippa Delivery Company, which is a last mile delivery company working here in Kuwait, in Saudi, in UAE. So that's one of the, and there's one more which we're very proud of, is called Shippa, or we call it Humula, which is Shippa trucks.
Mhm.
And they're like Uber for trucks in Saudi. So again, as agility, although we know that the distance is, I mean, the vessel is not going to be changed very much, but on the other side, working with the consumers, what Max is doing is the correct way. You're trying to get more data, being more visualized, trying to be more directly and less waste. So at least you can give a better offer to your customer and a better service to your customer. So that's what's agility been doing in Shipper Freight. We're trying to be we're one of the first platforms to move things digitally. So if you go to a Shipper Freight, we have like, I think more than 180 lines, which are all live lines. You can go get your actual quote and pay and get your container ready to be shipped. And for some other lanes, you just send your request, or when after you put your request, you'll get a message in 2 to 3 hours that this is your code for this line and such and such. The biggest difficulty with Shipper Freight we're facing is like customs in each country, the rules change, things change. So you need to be sure that everything in each port in the world, you have that data updated hourly, so you can give your customer your best service. So that's Shipper Freight for us. So again, as agility, we're trying to stay as agility, and we're trying to transfer to Logistics 4.0 by reaching to our consumers directly. We serve Unilever, we serve P&G, we serve all these customers. We're trying to serve them all the way to the end consumer versus before we had distribution centers in between. So this is a challenge we're going to be working on, but we're very happy we did that. And I agree with Sheikh Abdulaziz. During COVID-19, it was our greatest year. Honestly, we did very good. We were double shifting. Everything was the same issues you had guys in customs. Maybe the biggest changes before you have to move construction materials, but during COVID-19, it was more food, more medical equipment. The category of things you're moving changed dramatically, but volumes grew much faster.
Well, I would congratulate you on the accomplishment. I can't imagine how difficult that is to manage between each country's port. And I'm sure Sheikh Abdulaziz will agree. Each country has, even, for example, Bahrain and Saudi has different rules and the customs and all. So congratulations on the Shipper Freight.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've mentioned issues. Sheikh Abdulaziz, would you elaborate? Have you faced any issues, or what are the issues that this field, the logistics and the supply chain, you frequently encounter, and can it be solved with the new technologies that already are present or in the future might be present?
Like I agree with Max and Ted. Things are stepping up. Things are changing. The industry is changing. Like they mentioned, like how travel agents to apps. And now with these kind of apps where, forget that I'm not an official now or customs, like as a consumer, like I want to ship something. If I have it on my phone, it's more convenient. I'll do it, I'll use it. So by opening up these doors that were closed in the past, now opening these doors, it will lead more people to channel in. Like the things that we are facing, like we had the brokers come into us, to our facilities, whether it's at the port or the headquarters. The brokers to the companies who would come in just to follow up, to make sure everything's done. Everything shifted online. Like we had a folk system, like the backbone of the customs, where all the brokers can submit their documentation. Now you don't even have to visit the ports, like from payments to tracking, everything is all done. And we're improving that even more. And that will take us up to the next level, which will happen very soon. But everything's already migrated online. So in that sense, we opened up that door for them. that they can channel it. And we even recently launched an app called Ufuk Lite, where you can download it from the iOS or the Android store, and you can follow up and check all your documentations.
Oh, I guess the COVID did made it fast-paced digitization. It kind of made you hustle and run just to get it done. Well, that's the pro of the COVID, if we would like to say.
Yeah, there's always a flip side to everything. There's always a flip side to a coin, to everything. Like for us, it was great that for His Excellency the President, just spearheaded this whole thing. Just we're going this way, and everyone picked up, and we went. It was a fast move. We were already there. We already had our services. It's not like we were lacking behind. We're already up to par. So that just made things. We enabled it just to make things move faster, and but the biggest issue was that people are used to a certain way of doing things. Like they're used to coming. Do you want to physically come to our ports or to our facilities, to actually just to talk, just to make sure everything.
Human interaction.
Human interaction. But now with the COVID, like do it online. So it took for them a bit to adjust, but it was fine. Like we even launched the customer service call centers, like they can call up and more customer centric, at the end of the day, to get the feedback and to fix any of their issues that they need to. Sometimes, like the online or digitization, it's not a human interaction. And sometimes you need humans to get into to resolve issues. And I think we have a nice balance between that. And like even Fahad said, the equipment, like the things that we used to receive pre-COVID and after COVID, or during COVID, the materials changed. Like when the vaccines were coming in, the World Customs Organization, the organization around the world, the customs, we welcomed the vaccines with the red carpet. Instead of a delegation, it was boxes, and so the guys in customs did an amazing job here in Bahrain. I have to say that, and probably around the world, like with the World Customs Organization, like having all of these policies and procedures so everyone can ease trade, and make sure like the equipment that we're receiving are not counterfeited. At the start of it, like everyone wanted to gain, like with medical equipment or mask, or no one knows what's going on, like literally a year ago today, like we didn't know what's happening, like we don't know what is what. Yeah. And we had to be on top of things. We had to be on top of things to make sure like what we're getting is legit and not counterfeit, and it states what it is.
Well, congratulations, and I'll sound biased, but I'm proud to hear all this, and hopefully we'll see more and more of all this digitization and these accomplishments in the future.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you, Sheikh Aziz. Wa'el, could you tell us about your parametric insurance? Now we'll move on from the logistics a bit to talk about the parametric insurance. How will it shape the way we move?
Yeah, actually, I try to mix properly so that people have the context of transportation. So I will try to spin and the conversation towards transportation. I think it was great to hear the other game changers and fellows and also the industry. So before we start, parametric, what is parametric insurance? Well, parametric insurance is a very simple concept whereby an insurance company and its client, they determine an event or a triggering point, and if the event occurs, it triggers an automatic payment. So in our conversation tonight, parametric insurance should be perceived or considered an extension into the value chain of Industry 4.0 or logistics that we can apply in this particular industry. And I'll give you a few examples. So now, For logistics, and putting into perspective the technology that we've developed, which is hybrid again, we can address the visibility and traceability issues around transportation. So if you look at, today, you have a tracking number that allows you to track your parcel or delivery. But it needs a human action, right? There's a barcode that needs to be scanned at each transit point. So we consider this too passive, okay? And you will only have the time and location stamped. So now with an active solution like ours, you expand the metrics. So not only location and point, but really understanding, other variables such as temperature, humidity, shocks, right? And so with this active technology, you can gain information or insight and then predict certain risks because you can have alerts that come before the event happens. So there is the power of predictive. And then if it happens, well, now you have an accountability tool, something that can easily determine the responsibility. So having or looking at the parametric insurance solution, it puts all the right requirements across the value chain, which are operational excellence, predicting and mitigating risks, and ultimately removing the unknown factors when transfers of responsibility occurs, which is the case in transportation. So do expect new technologies like ours, challenging how things are moved, and we see it with our clients. And we see also a big push for accountability, accuracy, and financial performance.
And in that terms or in those fields, with Sticker, what gap are you trying to cover in the logistics field?
So there are many, okay? One is that we've seen, which is a regular or a chronicle issue for IoT adoption, let's put it this way, is really on the energy. Clients are looking for a solution that has access to sustainable source of energy. And so we base our device on being self-powered. So we are not we're not a plug and play solution. We're actually a plug and forget. You plug it once, it lasts, over the lifespan of the asset. And the reason is we use energy harvesters, multiple ones, in order to harvest the energy. So the energy that is needed for the system to work. So you can easily, expand the lifespan. You can actually go beyond the lifespan of the asset itself. And this is what large-scale operators of assets are looking for. Something that you do once and that they can live with it. But if you have to change or recharge the battery, it's a big issue. Second thing is connectivity. So we use multiple communications protocols. Right now, on the first version, we have 4, which are all using ground infrastructure. But we have the next version, which will include the nanosatellite connectivity, which will basically allow you to stream data on deserts, in a desert or an ocean, or even in the jungle, so that you remove the connectivity gaps. Now on the data side, right, so our device has multiple sensors, and we've done it in such a way where we can host even third-party sensors so that the data, is relevant to the customer and is always, consistent. And so with the granularity of the data, it allows you to better manage the risks, okay? And so with the power of AI and ML, this is where you can predict those risks. So for instance, and we have a client which is a pharmaceutical company, and it's precisely on transportation. So if I have a spike of temperature of more than 1 degree, let's say over a period of 20 minutes, okay, while I'm transporting vaccines, we can send an alert. So basically informing the driver, the client, all the stakeholders, so that they can take corrective measures before it's too late. Because one thing you have to understand is that in the pharmaceutical industry, which is one of the biggest, the vaccines or drugs are considered high value goods. And I think particularly, in the time of COVID, it's very relevant, and it can take up to 18 months to be produced. So imagine if, the disruption, if only one shipment goes wrong. So that's a big, big issue for pharmaceuticals, because beyond the financial implications, because in pharmaceuticals, they insure everything, but it's really like, more at the strategic level, where they basically offer room for competition to actually come in and push for their product. So it has a deeper problem. And so finally, for logistics, it's all about moving, goods amongst, with many parties. So the solution allows you to determine responsibilities much faster and bring more efficiencies on how operations are run, and it improves your financials and it reduces your loss. So really, it's closing the gap on operation excellence, I would say, in the field of transportation that we can now remove.
Well, I'd like to hear from Agility on what do you think about what Wael just talked about, especially with the vaccine period that we're going through right now. Would it be
So
something important to be considered, or I would I understood well. It's definitely very very important for the pharmaceuticals. But what about other fields, Mr. Fahad?
So again, what Zoal doing is great, honestly, and we've been seeing several like startups in several like sectors or verticals. So maybe Zoal has a certain edge. You find somebody who has maybe a longer life cycle, somebody who can work in harder environments, somebody who can provide information in a better way. So the IoT is becoming something very popular. Again, because I work mostly in the Middle East, the most advanced country maybe here is in this region, Saudi. They forced all of the trucks to have a certain kind of IoTs. So when you work or you need to get information, you can get much more details information on the shipment from point A to point B. Either it's temperature or humidity. There's some items which is too much shaking on the street or they want to a sand way that the material maybe gets broken. So each one has its own way to read information. But I think Wal is in the right direction, and this is the future to have the whole life cycle of the story of the item all the way from China, maybe to my home here in Kuwait. So I congratulate him on this great move.
Okay, thank you very much, Fahad. I see your point, and this is the thing. Like, when you're in corporation, particularly in labs and innovation, you see so many technologies. So, you have a tendency to categorize, people. What we've seen, our markets are primarily Europe and US. We've been accelerated also in Skydeck, which is the acceleration program of Berkeley University. And it was clear the second biggest, I would say, category of goods moved on US roads is actually pharma. So just to give you the magnitude, in Europe, same consideration. Everything a lot of requirements around temperature sensitive goods. Maybe in agility, because I grew up in Switzerland, so agility is very well known for fine art. We have also some discussions where we could actually apply our technology, when you move those goods, because what if you are storing it next to something that is how many shocks that you can actually undergo. So you can have also a issue around responsibility if it's shaken. So there are many, many ways. For us, we didn't really take IoT as the destination. Is actually IoT is the starting point, if you see what I mean. So we go from IoT to implement it into different categories and moving really onto the predictive analytics, because the way how we've done our solution, we're not the first one, probably not the last one, but we've done it right because we have the right trade-offs on energy, connectivity, and sensor. But it's really the ability or capability to understand the exogenous risk. So it's the risk that are around the asset and to the nearest point. And then we have also the capacity to understand the endogenous risk, which is inside. So we have different capabilities, and it goes, into we build the value proposition a little bit further. So thank you very much for the good feedback. I hope pharma is big. We've seen also energy. We have one of the biggest trading company commodities. They extract minerals and they need to move it from, let's say, DRC Congo to Tanzania, which is the nearest port. And as you can imagine, there are many connectivity gaps. Insurance costs a lot of money, and they need to get those products back to Europe or to China. So we have the ability to now try to remove the dependency on physical infrastructure. Okay, so self-powered, different connectivity, including the satellite, and then also the ability to put more sensors.
Thank you, Wael. One last before this. How do you see this happening in the next 5 years? Do you see that it's going to be very adaptive and easily adaptive by the companies, or maybe give it more time?
No, what we see is, we work bottom up and top down. Initially, we're focused on industrials, so large operators of assets. But then after the acceleration in the US, we've seen more traction on the insurtech side, so working more top down. And what we see is that we're talking with very big, large companies. and they actually want to get into parametric insurance products. Like right now, the trend for insurance is actually to move from traditional insurance. So traditional insurance right now, what happens is that 95% of the time, because except for natural catastrophes, is declarative data. So if you have a flood, right, you need to declare it to your insurance company. It's not something that the insurance can know before. And so the problem is you have a big risk of fraud. This is why it needs to be assessed. So technology like ours provide that kind of like, impartial data, and it allows you to have the accuracy of the data met so that you're able to push forward towards like parametric insurance. Because parametric insurance is to, I meet an event, it's index based, or the event happened, I trigger a payment. So instead of having 6 months to get reimbursed, you get it, within days. It also fast track the entire claim processing picture. It also allow your customers to be more loyal, because if you have such frameworks, very hard for you to go to another insurance company. You can also insure more operations, which are not captured right now. So you have many, many ways where you can really grow. But for logistics, what we see is that clearly digitalization is happening. If you're just working with time and location stamps, this is way too over, because this is not enough. So is logistics 1.2 happening? Probably, let's see. I don't know, just casting it out there. Now there is a big risk for, there is a big push for risk mitigation, I think simply because they're too costly. So you need to have solutions that have predictive capabilities. And then I think the most interesting one, and I think this would be very relevant in, for customs, but also in, in fintech, is the solution or data provided by companies like ours, and we're already discussing with a few groups in that, is that they will be used as smart contract, okay? And they will be aggregated on blockchain, because this is where you have the power of IoT that can influence the future of money. Are you shipping a valuable good correctly? Yes or no? But the IoT will determine the financial implication with regards to a particular good. A good may appreciate or depreciate relative to the conditions under which the good is shipped. And then finally, I mean, more like on the operation side, it's we see less delays in less unknown factors such as losses, and more constant flow optimization in transportation. At Sticker, we're already looking at how we can bring our solutions smaller and flexible, like using flexible circuit boards, so that we could actually see an active IoT like on a tape, and you would be actually taping your future Amazon parcel with an active solution. So you won't need to have a scan. You just go on the app and the conditions in which. So we see connected packaging also like more and more emerging, and that really beyond just time and location stamps.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Wael and our game changers. Any last comments from Bahrain Customs or Agility? We're kind of running out of time. It's been a very interesting conversation, but if you have any last comments.
From my side, I'm good. If you have any questions, ask me. Now take the opportunities to.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Game changers, do you have any questions?
So again, I mean, from my side, Agility, we've been very active in the Middle East, and as everybody's working maybe in Pakistan and other countries, we're trying to be more active here in the Middle East. We invested in an e-commerce company called Zid in Saudi, and another company called Expand Cart in Egypt, because we see that everything's going to be changing in the next decade. So we hope to be part of that game now and later, and after. And wish everybody else the best. All these companies are superstars, amazing guys,
game changers, like you said.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure having you all, and thank you for giving us some of your time. It's been really great, a very interesting conversation, and hopefully we'll meet together soon in some other days. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.